Hello and welcome to our next breakout room for the political activist track. I am joined here by some incredible leaders from all across our country. The title of this panel is Advancing Social Change in Governments and Campaigns. We have folks here who currently work in government, who have done a lot of campaigning work from all across the country. So we have a wealth of knowledge in this room today, in this virtual room. Please feel free to interact with us in the chat box. If you have any questions, any feelings, emotions, reactions, feel free to pop them in the chat. So we're just going to get started because we don't have that much time. Our last track, as you know, some of you joined us, went so fast. So we're just going to dive right into our conversation. So my first question for you all is, tell us about yourself and the work that you do in your community, and how you became involved. We will start with SJ, and then we'll go to Lauren, Cassandra, and Manali.
Awesome. Well, hi everybody. My name is SJ. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm coming from Minnesota. That's where I am in school at Hamlin right now doing that work. And I am a community activist. I label myself as a gender equality activist as well, working for mostly in the Native American communities. I come from the Midwakaton or Bedewakantawan Dakota tribe in Minnesota. And so a lot of the kind of community activist work I do is around that. And right now I'm working for the office of Minnesota State Senator Mary Kunish, and doing kind of work for her, gender activist work for the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Task Force. But I'll definitely talk more about that later. But that's kind of just the rundown for me. I do a lot of work with Indigenous communities in Minnesota.
Hi, everyone. That was awesome. My name is Lauren, and I serve as the Ignite Atlanta Fellow, and I also serve as the legislative aide for Georgia Representative Lewis Ward. I'm actually calling from the Georgia Capitol right now, so if you see me put on my mask, it's just because there's people walking in and out, but I want to stay safe. I got involved through my college chapter, my College Ignite chapter, where I met the past fellow, Kirsten Jackson, and there I was able to really resonate with a group of young women that are really passionate about serving their community through their lived experiences and really making the effort to empower one another. So I was just like gravitated towards Ignite, and I served through a membership and then moving on to the executive board. And then I had the opportunity to become a fellow, which is like one of my favorite things to do. And through there, I was able to meet a lot of elected officials, community leaders, organize events with both of those people. And there I was able to cultivate a really awesome relationship with the representative I work for now. And yeah, it's been an awesome journey, and I can't wait to share more about that with you guys.
Hi everyone, my name is Cassandra. I'm calling from Chicago, Illinois. I'm actually at home working virtually. And speaking of work, I work for the Office of the City Treasurer for the City of Chicago as an investment analyst, and I've been doing that work for 2 years. Aside from that, the community activism I started when I graduated from college, working on an aldermanic campaign as a co-manager. And so a lot of my organizing is grassroots and going door to door and trying to get people to the polls, but also just inform them about their right to vote.
Hi, everyone. My name is Manali Bhakta, and I am calling from Shakopee, Minnesota. So from Minnesota in the Twin Cities, similar to SJ. So I graduated from Gustavus Adolphus College last year, actually, in May of 2020, as a political science and English major. And so it was just very fitting for me to like get involved with the 2020 election. So I started interning on Minnesota One's congressional candidate, Dan Feehan's campaign, and then ended up becoming a field organizer for that campaign. So it was a very competitive election, but I think that what it taught me was the power of uplifting, voices that for so long have been oppressed, or, also restoring decency to a congressional seat, and then trying to, restore trust with people as well. So that's in terms of like my organizing in the professional world. But now I work for the Minnesota Private College Council. And what we do is we advocate for higher education funding for underrepresented, BIPOC, low and middle income families to go to school here in Minnesota, because higher education is not cheap. We really have to, think about the educational inequities, especially in Minnesota, which prides itself in being like a education like top dog, but then also has a lot of inequities in terms of race, socioeconomic status. So that's what we do, is like we try to advocate with the legislature to promote more inclusive and equitable policies for our students at the private colleges. But in terms of like what brings me to this organizing work, I served as the student body president at a school that for so long had always, the same sort of leadership, or like coming from like a predominantly white institution, the same sort of leadership in for students. So I think that like that's where it really hit me of being like, even though this is a student senate election, I want to do my part to advocate for underrepresented students, minorities at our colleges, in order to have a more equitable and then also a more inclusive space to learn. So that's where my passions lie.
Thank you all so much. Literally all the reasons why you just said, like you do the work that you do, is the reason why I wanted to create this panel. So, you all work in government, campaigns, like these are spaces that have power, building political power in our communities, and has a significant say in like who gets what and why. So I'm curious, what does advancing social change mean to you? And especially as a young person, we know we have a whole bunch of young people joining us today. What does it mean as a young person to occupy spaces that were not designed for us and not designed for us to be impactful? And this kind of gets into the conversation around imposter syndrome, and how do you remind yourself that you belong there just like anybody else? And how do you like leverage and yield the power that, the positions that you're in, whether it's in government or campaigning, how do you yield that to make the impact that we need? I'll let anybody begin with that.
I can spearhead that if that's okay with you guys. For me, it's really letting my why be a driving factor to the work that I do. So for me, my why stems from my upbringing and the experiences that I faced living in Chicago, and really seeing Black and brown people being affected by things that other people weren't being affected by. So those things for me were poor public education, violence, homelessness, really being in those communities and seeing those issues and saying, hey, like, why are these things happening? And then making that connection to local government and seeing that need of better representation. And then coming to Agnes Scott, the college I go to, and meeting elected officials and community leaders like Stacey Abrams, who really do that. They let their why drive their mission, their force, and they're really serving their community. And that is my main priority when I go into these spaces. And also another one of my priorities is really making sure that in everything that I do, I'm uplifting people around me, because I understand that it is a privilege for me to be in these spaces because it is dominated by white men, especially here at the Georgia Capitol. Can't really talk super loud, but that's just the reality. So making sure that I work on my self-confidence and work on really making myself known in these spaces, because at the end of the day, like we all belong in these spaces and we're here for a reason. So why not be who we are in these spaces? So that means introducing myself to everybody that I see, really making myself known and being that person that other people can rely on, being that person that my representative can rely on, so that we can continue this mission of having more women of color, having more Black women in these spaces.
That's great, Lauren. To just expand on that, since I did some campaigning in Chicago specifically, I was working on an aldermanic campaign, and I had just found out what an alderman was. I didn't even know. And so I learned who my alderman was. I noticed that he was there for 15 whole years and nobody ever ran against him. So I was like, well, this is odd. I was like, if no one runs against him, I'll run. But then I found other people running against him this specific year. So I decided to reach out to those people, and I was like, I really want to help on your campaign. Can I help? And so I just hit the floor running. But one thing that I really learned from that is, because my candidate did not win and we still have that same incumbent, he kept his seat. And so although change didn't come from that, what I saw change in other ways, in the sense where, like, I was out campaigning, talking to young people, I went to the parks, and like, here's like a quick story, but I went to the park and there was kids playing basketball, and I was like, you know what, let me go ask them if they are voting. And so I went to talk to them, and they were like very interested in what I had to say. And they didn't realize, like, in Chicago, you can actually run for alderman once you turn 18 years old. And so that, like, really, like, they were surprised, and like they smiled about that. They're like, really? Wow, I could run now if I wanted to. And so seeing that, I feel like that's where social change comes, because you're bringing more people into the conversation and you're listening to more people and you're empowering them. So those were like the three main things that I really learned from campaigning. So yeah, that's what I have to say on that.
Yeah. Is okay if I just jump in quick? I'm just gonna say, I think that what's really important for me, and the reason that I keep going, is that why. And I think my why is that my voice matters. And I feel like, to anybody like on this call, like, you need to understand that your voice matters, because again and again and again, you'll be hit with the wall of like, yeah, you don't fit in these spaces, but that's because they were created for white old men. And that's okay. Like, they weren't created for you. So you're almost like, there's a saying in Dakota, and this is like my kind of why, is that the saying is like, we walk in the footsteps that our ancestors made for us, and we continue those footsteps on. But we also carry our ancestors with us. And so I think the biggest thing for me for social change and kind of projecting that forward is understanding how many Native women behind me have fought for me, have fought just to have a space in the Minnesota State Senate, just to have a space at the table. And so now that we're being invited into tables, like, making our voices heard. And so for me, like, social change, it means that, like, it's going to be really uncomfortable. It's like, change is never something that feels good. It's always something where we're getting pushed outside of our comfortability. And so to be that person to push people outside of that comfortability, they're not going to love you, because they like staying in that position. They like being that incumbent. They like being that person that always gets voted for. And so to like just like build on those other girls and what they were saying, is just like, social change to me is just being that uncomfortable voice. Like, you're in a position that wasn't created for you. You're going to say things that have never been said out loud before, but need to be said in order for us to move into a country, into a nation that truly does represent all people. And so, yeah, that's what it means for me. I don't know about you guys, but
I would echo all three of you. I think that it starts with like recognizing our own self-worth in these spaces, and doing that sort of soul searching to realize that we have the humanity to be in these spaces. These decisions, especially when it comes to like women's rights or like for BIPOC communities, like Esther said, they weren't created for us intentionally to keep us out of politics and keep us out of like decision making in order for the hierarchy to stand. And so it's, as hard as it is, I have definitely felt the sort of imposter syndrome, especially working on a male dominated campaign, of like, oh, I'm the only woman of color there. But at the same time, it's like, it's crazy to me just how you know, you can be there, but then like the impact that it can have when other women of color or like BIPOC people can see that you were a field organizer for like one of the most competitive races in the country. That's amazing. And that can motivate them to like get involved as well. And also, like, I think that especially for marginalized communities, it you know, I don't blame them for like not wanting to like get involved with the political process if they've always been suppressed and they've always been disregarded. So I think that like when we take these spaces, what Lauren was saying is like it's a privilege to be here, and I definitely want to acknowledge that and also understand that like we have to go to them. And so like for the campaign that I was working on, I brought in the idea of doing like a bilingual voter outreach event because not everybody speaks English, and teaching, you know, where people can get their mail-in ballot or like where they can drop off their ballot or any sort of like voter awareness, just so we're able to, you know, again, spread awareness about voting, and then we can give the people back their power. And then also in terms of like police brutality and just trying to center Black voices in politics, we organized an event with the NAACP and, you know, Black Excellence across Minnesota, specifically to show that we are going to go to you, so you can tell us how we can improve as a campaign and how our candidate can listen to your voices, and center, you know, your narrative and his decision making and his legislative agenda, instead of us sort of trying to speak up for BIPOC communities when we don't have the expertise to do that. And you know, that's also like how are we going to actually create social change if we don't actually value and respect and invite the voices into our in our legislative policy making. So I think that's something that a lot of campaigns definitely have to understand in terms of like doing voter outreach to all communities and not just the white majority, but then also have to continue that when an elected official gets elected, to carry out those promises for social change.
Yeah, you all are hitting on some really, really important points. This makes me think about I was so lucky to watch Michelle Obama in action in person a couple of years ago. And one thing she said that always sticks with me is she says, well, there's two things actually. First is she's been in the rooms, like she has been in the rooms where decisions are being made. And I'll never forget. And she's like, they ain't that smart. Like that's what that was her response. She said, I've been in the rooms, y'all. And she's speaking to mostly young women crowd. And she's like, I've been in the rooms and I haven't seen anything that resembles the amount of brilliance that young women hold, right? And the second thing is she's noticed in her work that when we show up to the table, sometimes because we're so grateful that we're even at the table, we don't say anything once we get there, right? Because the environment, the table itself is set up in a way in which our voices are not being valued or protected or elevated, right? And I think it's this, when we talk about DEI work, we sometimes forget what does it mean? Like, what does the equity part of that mean, right? Like, it's not enough to just be diverse and to be inclusive in the sense that we just have folks of color and women of color on your tables, but what does it mean to value their responses and elevate their leadership in our rooms, in our workplaces, and in decision making? And part of that is getting to this point where we're able to harness our power and sit in those rooms and say the things that we need to say. We need to say the truth, right? Truth telling is something that we authentically are, you know, that's just what we do. That's what women do. So I'm curious, in your roles, I know that it's harder. So how do you maintain this practice of truth telling, and how, like, because you're talking about the fact that it's not just about you, but it's who comes after you and the room that you're creating for them. So how do you continue truth telling in a way that creates space for others?
I can start. I think that's a big question, because I think that's, as I start in my life of active advocacy work, I think that you always think about the legacy that you leave. And I think that, you know, what's important to acknowledge too is, like, I am white coded Dakota. Like, I have white privilege, and I harness that when I, you know, I have that when I walk into rooms. But I think the reality that we so many times don't understand the power that we have to talk about our communities. And I think with Native Americans, it's really hard because a lot of us, we look very different. Like we can look, 100% Native to 25% Native can look so different. And it's important when we sit down at those tables to acknowledge who we represent when we sit down, and to like harness those, like the power of our communities, and use that to speak for them. And I think one of the biggest things is understanding the knowledge that you bring to that table. Like you were talking about Obama, or Michelle Obama, like she humanizes politics so well. Like these people, like they're just people. Like they're not like, yeah, maybe they went to like Harvard Law School. Yeah, maybe they studied at these ABCD schools, but they are just as human as the next person. They read the same books, they read the same reports, they're given the same data. And so I think what's important, especially as someone like me who doesn't come from a line of people going to law school or going to college or going to these things, is understanding that I still matter in those places, that the things that I get, or the comments that I have, are important. And, like we were saying before, like taking that space, I think a big issue in Minnesota right now for Indigenous communities is line 3. I can't sit on a panel of activists and not acknowledge that as a Native American woman. And what a lot of people don't understand is it's like really connected to high levels of trafficking for Native American women. And we're already seeing numbers of Indigenous women be trafficked in those communities. And a lot of people, well, we see in the Senate a lot of the times, a lot of the different committees that we sit on, or a lot of the different Zoom calls that I'm on, people are like, why is it such a big deal? Like, it's going to bring jobs to these communities. It's going to, like, we've made sure that it didn't go through necessarily sacred land. But there's so much more behind it that they don't take the time to understand, because Native American women and Native American people haven't been at those tables before. And so now that we're advocating for our own communities, it's like stepping in and saying, like, you know what, I have a piece of knowledge that I need to share with them, and that I need to speak up on behalf. So I think that's a thing for me, for sure.
I agree with SJ in terms of like being able to tell our stories authentically and unapologetically. I've definitely experienced that in terms of like being conflicted about like my own personal identity in these predominantly white spaces. Have thought about like, is there something wrong with me? Do I not have the right qualifications? Am I not thinking the way that I should be thinking? But then at the same time, it's like, no, my lived experiences are meant to be there to help diversify and make it more equal for like myself to be there to work and function with the organization that I'm working with, but then also more people after me. And I think that another thing it's important to acknowledge is that we have to make and sort of convince and try to make the oppressor understand that they have to be on the side of the social change with us, because especially with these protests of like Black Lives Matter or the AAPI solidarity events, I want to see people who are in high places of power or have white privilege come and actually, be speaking at these events, or, leading these events. It's always, I guess, the burden is always placed on BIPOC marginalized communities to obviously first go through the trauma of of having to deal with all of the social change, like the social inequities within our communities, having to grieve with it, having to deal with the mental ramifications of it, but then also bring awareness to it. So I think that it's so important to again acknowledge that that we belong there. We deserve to have a space at the table, and we have to make these like lawmakers understand I remember that every time that like I bring in students to meet with their legislators virtually because of COVID, and asking them to share their story is like, this is your meeting with your legislator. We're not just talking about, you know, what my organization, what we want to lobby for. You have the opportunity to bring up any social issue that you care about, because at the end of the day, you're their boss, because you're going to be electing them or not electing them in the future. So you have the power of voting, and they, you know, it's a loss on them if they don't listen to you. So I would say that like, it's really important to, again, unapologetically be yourself, share your story authentically, and also just understand that this sort of organizing work, it shouldn't just fall on the most marginalized communities. The people at the top have to show that they stand in solidarity with us.
I like strongly believe that organizers and activists are the best people to be in these spaces, because we truly understand what it means to be marginalized. We've spoken to these people, we've, you know, lived with these people, we've, you know, been friends with these people, and we understand the need for a more equitable government and a more equitable world. So I think as an organizer at Ignite, and then being able to be in this political space, being able to bridge the gap between these like purposefully difficult legislation, and you know, all this jargon, and being able to bridge that gap, and make it more comprehensible and make it more accessible to our young women and our young women of color. For example, a few weeks ago, I had an event, an advocacy event for House Resolution 128, which calls to lower the voting age to 17, which we're having a workshop tomorrow, by the way, where we're going to be talking about how we can do that in our community. So stay tuned, just wanted to plug that in. And we had like an hour-long event where I invited our young women from, you know, our community in Metro Atlanta, and I invited my representative, Regina Lewis Ward, who was a co-sponsor on this resolution. And she shared why that bill matters to her, but she also got the opportunity to hear from our young women and hear from their perspectives, and hear, hey, like, why does lowering the voting age make a significant impact, and why they think it'll make a significant impact. And it does humanize, you know, the politicians. It does give, you know, a space for our young women to really connect with these representatives, and make it more attainable, make it a goal that they can actually go in and strive for. And after these events, I see, you know, these young women come back to more events and really see their confidence going up, because not only are we educating them in these policy issues, but we're also giving them the opportunity to speak for themselves, which is the most important part, because you need confidence to be in these spaces. So yeah.
So for me, working in government, I do have a different perspective. I currently, the treasurer, she is from an underserved area. Second Black woman to be elected as treasurer of the city of Chicago. So definitely when she came in, she wanted to focus on D, E, and I across all of that we do. But what we do at the city treasurer's office has to deal with handling taxpayers' money and making sure that it is invested with being a fiduciary. So we have to make sure that that money is safely being moved and producing the best amount of benefit for the taxpayers. So it's interesting just hearing you all speak and about community activism, because I think activists and government services, or elected officials interact very differently, and their just communication is also different. And so it's just really nice to hear that. I think that government services, government systems, elected officials, heads of these offices need to start possibly creating more spaces to speak with these activists, to talk, and to even just be more transparent. Because even though like our office, we don't interact that much with the public, but the job we do is going to determine how the budget's going to go for the city, which is later going to determine how much taxes people are going to pay. So we're a little bit removed, but at the same time, our decisions are going to impact somebody's life. And so being able to be transparent about that and transparent about that with the activists is something that I think is lacking, in, at least for the city of Chicago. I can speak on my experience. However, our office is very diverse. So now it's about that question. Okay, you have the people in the room, you have the people to speak on your behalf, to truth tell, but how do we go further than that? And how can we create tangible goals and exceed and our goals and our expectations? So those are questions that I continue to think about, and still trying to figure out, but always trying to push forward, and definitely having this support, having this group, being a Ignite fellow. I'm able to gain a lot of insight and take that back with me into what I do on a daily basis.
I think that's so important what you're saying right here. It's that, one, we need community when we're in these spaces. It can't be just us speaking up. That's not safe. Oftentimes it's not safe for us, whether it's our jobs or our literal safety. And then the other point you're bringing up is the fact that government sometimes are so detached from the people that they serve. And government is supposed to be of, for, and by the people, right? The government is supposed to be a reflection of the people, and the government should only have the power that the people grant it, right? And this is what Manali was talking about before, where we are actually the bosses of our elected officials. We get to elect them, and we can also unelect them. And I think understanding that dynamic is difficult when we have like been raised into this society and, like, you know, indoctrinated in some ways that to like to see elected officials as like some other like huge, like powerful people who aren't just human beings who have been elected by the people. So I'm like getting so into this, but I'm just curious, like, how do you like keep this dynamic in your mind when you're working and like continuing the work, and then how do you empower others to do the same?
I think one thing that we all have to remember is we can't do this work if we aren't taking care of ourselves. And it's hard to do, right? Especially, I know a lot of us have our hands in like so many different roles where we're leading a lot of different communities. And a lot of the times we suffer from burnout because we want to do it all. You know, we want to be the person that is in those spaces and is flexible and is willing to do the work, but we can't do that work if we burn out. So I think it's really important that we take care of ourselves and we encourage others to take care of themselves. And one way to do that is really having these spaces of other young women who are, you know, like us, where we're talking, you know, about these issues, and we're talking about the challenges that we face, and we're honest about the issues that we face, like imposter syndrome. I was talking to some of my friends a week ago, some of the chief of staffs in the Capitol. Sorry, there's someone coming in. And they were talking about how we were all talking about how we all experience imposter syndrome. And it's funny because at the beginning of the session, like, we weren't super close. We were just talking about work, but we started like talking more. So like we got closer and we got more personable, and we started sharing advice about how we can be better at taking care of ourselves and being authentic in these spaces. So having that support system is just so good for like our mental health. And I think it's just something that we have to prioritize. I forgot who said it. I think it was Audre Lorde who said that self-care is a revolutionary act. And I like carry that with me every day, because it's not okay that, you know, some of us are forgetting to eat or to drink water. And I see that so commonly, and it's not okay, because we need to be healthy and we need to be grounded when we go into these spaces that are so stressful and so high, and, you know, have a lot of high intensity. So
Being in government, I'm very grateful to be working with a diverse group of individuals. However, I do just want to mention, like, whatever space you're entering, whether that's the corporate field, wherever, I know sometimes people get the sense like, oh, I'm here, so I don't want anybody else like me to come, because then they're going to be my competition. And that goes with women too. Just women are now represented fully in different industries. And so I just want to say, like, that's just something that we have to keep in mind and always fight against, and to really support one another as sisters. And just like with Ignite, a young woman reached out to me and she wanted to work in government. She's graduating from college. So I was like, give me your resume and I'll send it to the treasurer and see if maybe you could get an internship. And she just interviewed. So I'm like really excited for her. And it's just a matter of connecting with people and just being that support for someone, because so many people have supported me, and it's, we have to give that back. And so just keeping that in mind, and hopefully we can change that idea that some people might have, because you may come across people like that don't want to help because they are out for their self-interest. And so just pushing forward and trying to go against that is some of the advice I would give.
I agree with both of you, because I think that, especially when you say, like, put your own, self-interest aside, you have to understand that, like, you're not the only organizer who can do this work. If you need to take a break, like, don't feel bad about it, and, like, don't feel as if, like, you're letting anybody down. Like, you've made an impact, but if you need to take a mental break, or just need to, like, jump into a different career just because, like, the sort of, like, the taxing sort of labor, and also the sort of the mental stress that comes with, like, public service, because you're serving other people. If you need to take a break, don't feel bad about it, because I think that, once you're able to take a break, you can recharge and re-enter, and you can stand on the side as well and cheer on other women, other BIPOC people who are also, taking agency. And it's also important to understand that, like, a movement isn't built by one person. That's just a recipe for disaster, or, like, that's just a recipe for dictatorship, and authoritarianism. Like, a democracy survives when we have, like, a collective group of people who are willing to stand up for the uh, the common good, and are able to hold their government accountable if they're seeing things that are happening and they don't like it. So there's power in numbers, and that'll make your organizing life a lot more easier, and it'll actually keep the movement going forward, I would say.
Yeah, I affirm everything that was just said. I think for me, something that I've just recently really started to bring into my practice is taking moments to acknowledge how hard or heavy the things that I'm studying or working on are. Some of my work that I do is I work with some community activists who are working on some ICWA regulations, which, if you don't know what ICWA is, it's the Indian Child Welfare Act that was passed federally in the 70s. We're having issues, it was created to keep Native American children in homes and not be forcibly removed through social services, falsifying papers. It was used as an act to basically continue the belief that they wanted to kill the Indian and save the man. And so right now we're seeing a lot of pushback by that judicially. And so we're trying to, create healing commissions for adoptees that were forcibly removed. We're trying to, create legislation that stops this removal from happening. And so studying and creating background and purposes and like why, trying to get legislators on the train of like why this is important it means I have to do a lot of work of studying the history of it. And also carrying, my grandma was forcibly removed from her home through, not a judicial system, not following the protocols of ICWA. Like I carry that, with me. I carry that historical trauma. And so for me, it's been acknowledging like, this is hard work. Like, this is not like, I'm not sitting down, studying science or, learning how, chemicals bond. Like I'm sitting down and studying how people who I carry their DNA with me were forcibly removed and hurt in their childhoods. Like I'm studying painful things. And so a part of my self-care is just like acknowledging that and creating more space for myself. Like if I need to step away and make a meal and I need to care for myself, then I need to do that, because I love what you were saying Manali about how like it's not one person, you know, like you step away, like it's not just you, like it's a community. It's understanding that this movement, it was moving without you and it will continue to move. But you do play an important role, but stepping back doesn't mean that things aren't going to happen. And so I think that's like a really humbling thing to do, to remind yourself like I need to care for myself. And like back to, you know, what you were talking about before of just like how you cannot do stuff if you're burnt out. And so acknowledging your purpose in that. And I think for me, the biggest thing is just having community around me. I think bringing people into kind of the hard things that I'm studying, especially in a virtual world when I'm not sitting in a classroom or sitting in a panel with people every day that are studying the same things that I'm doing and advocating the same way. It's really easy to take that and carry it yourself. And so I try to call up, you know, my mom, or I try to call up someone, you know, I have friends on the Ignite chapter at Hamlin, and I call them up and I'm just like, you know, today I'm really heavy. I was studying this. And then I can hear them talk about their work and create that really important community where like they can step in and say, wow, like I had no idea that that was a part of that history. And so I don't carry that burden alone. Yeah. And then just to your question about like bringing people along into that, I just like also really support, like whenever someone has an idea, I support that they bring that to whoever would listen to them. And then also because I carry a space, I like to like invite people into my space. So working on ICWA healing commissions, or inviting my tribe in to do the first commission, you know, like inviting people into the work that I do is really important for me.
I love that this went into a conversation about self-care because it is so needed. And this is actually what happened with our last panel, which is really a testament to, again, what SJ is saying. This work is heavy. This is not easy work. We don't get to just log off at 5 p.m. and say, oh, we're good, because another job starts at 5 p.m. Like that's honestly how I see it at this point. Like I have my 9 to 5, and then there's the job of the movement. But within that, self-care is important. And it's important for two things. One, because we need rest. This is just the work that we do is heavy and we deserve to rest. But also what Lauren was saying and what our good sister and auntie Audre Lorde said is that self-care is a revolutionary act. And it's a revolutionary act because they don't want us to rest. They don't want us to recharge. They don't want us to get back up and say, no, the fight is not done. No, our organizing is not done. We're here and we're going to keep going today, tomorrow, and the day after that, right? And I think that's why rest is so important, because it's not just about us, it's about all of us. And there are people that can pick back up wherever we left off whenever we go to take a break. And it's important to recharge and get back in the fight. Like that is what we're here to do. And that's what this track is all about. So I thank you for lifting that. I can't believe our time is like already coming to a close, but with the last 7 minutes that we have, I would love if we could talk about some of the, like, your call to actions or your words of advice or some of the greatest lessons that you've learned, whichever question, like, you know, sticks out to you for the people who are viewing this right now. I mean, we have young people from all across the country, all different time zones. What are like some of your greatest words of advice that you've gotten throughout your career, or some of the things that you just want to offer, or just some of the greatest like lessons that you've learned? So I will leave it open.
So I'll start off. So I would first say define your why and lead with it. That's the first thing. And then I would say advocate for yourself first. Figure out what you're good at, what you can improve on, what experiences you have, what you can bring to the table when you're applying to these positions, when you are you're looking for work or looking for a volunteer opportunity, making sure that you know who you are and what value you bring to the table that you want to belong to. And then lastly, finding an organization. It can be Ignite, or it can be any other organization or community that you find the mission resonates with you, and that can help you grow professionally or personally. And then also, I would say a biggest thing, and something that has led me to a lot of the opportunities I've been granted to this day, is really making sure that you volunteer and that you offer a hand, even if it's not paid. I think it's really important to make sure that you are in these rooms and connecting yourself with these people, with these women, these Black women, these women of color, because at the end of the day, like, they're going to need your help if they're running for office, and they win. They're going to need your help. They're going to need an aide. They're going to need an intern, and it's really important that you're there. You're there in those spaces. And then also the biggest thing is to just make sure that you're confident in who you are, because we're all beautiful humans. We all bring beautiful experiences and advice, and we're all super intelligent. Like Michelle Obama said, like, we're smarter than a lot of these people that are legislators. And at the end of the day, we're going to be those people in those rooms voting on these laws. And I'm just really excited to see you guys in these rooms and these spaces, because it just gives me a lot of hope for the future. So just keep the hope up. I know it's hard because we're going through a lot, but just know that I'm here for all of you. And there's like thousands and thousands of other Ignite women who are here for you when you decide that you want to be part of the movement.
Thank you, Lauren, for all those gems. Those are great. I just want to say that, you are needed in this work. And I think you'd be surprised by how you can get involved. It doesn't have to be the traditional way of knocking on people's doors. You can create art. You can just talk to someone, talk to a family member. I just wanted to bring up the art piece because during COVID, when we were in the quarantine and the riots were happening, I just was in a really down place because of just everything going on. And I felt like I needed to do something positive and something positive with the community. And so what ended up happening was I just like called different local artists and I just asked them, like, can we do like a mural in the community? And we ended up like getting all that, funding it. And so it's just, something small, like things that you can find in your community that you might want to see there. You want to see art there, or you want to see a little library, or just something that is going to bring positivity to the community and that's going to connect each other. Because I feel like at the end of the day, activism is about connecting with each other. And that's what I hope you all can get involved and do that. And don't be afraid to get involved, because it's really just something small that you can do that can make a huge impact.
Oh, I agree.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, go ahead, Manali.
Okay. Thank you, SJ. But yeah, I echo the sentiments of like what Lauren and Cassandra said about the fact of like, really unapologetically being yourself. And what that means is to just like, flourish in your talents, regardless of like what it is. I think that every sort of field, we sort of like paint like political science or like the social sciences, like this activist, sort of field or academic like career wise, in terms of like making sure that you can get your voice out. But every field has this. We saw this with COVID, like with the inequities, so in terms of like the healthcare system, and in the STEM field especially. So don't let what you see on TV or like what you see in the mainstream, of like just like political science majors becoming like political organizers or activists or working in government. It's a very intersectional field. So you really have to understand that like every sort of thing that you're doing, it should be, if especially if you're upset about the way that things are going in your field, especially with STEM, or any other academic field that you're in, and you want to make a change through equity, diversity, inclusion, that it can be done. And the reason why it hasn't been done yet is because, again, those spaces were created not for us, and they were created for old white heterosexual men. So I think that, again, it's important to be unapologetically yourself and also trust yourself, because a lot of times, like, I think that when we're applying to these government positions or trying to, be in these decision-making spaces, people can say, oh, like, you're not qualified or anything, or like, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, just because it happened to you doesn't mean that it happens to everybody. But that's just a way for them to invalidate your lived experiences, and really sort of brush away the problem that they know has been perpetuating for a long time. So again, trust yourself. And then again, that takes time. So if you need to, have self-care, or also just connect with people who are also doing this work alongside you, feel free to, be in community with others as well. Because I guarantee you that you're not the only one that's feeling it. Every woman or every BIPOC person or anybody who's ever been marginalized has also experienced that and has to get over that hurdle.
Yeah. Okay, my Wi-Fi is being shaky, so just let me know if I cut out. But I kind of want to go with the question of like, what's been the best piece of advice you've ever gotten? Um, it came a time where I was really uncertain of myself and really questioning what space I can take up in this world and what's my purpose. And I had just finished the book Just Mercy by Bryan Stevenson, and really it's about, following a criminal justice attorney seeking, justice for wrongful conviction, and it has a lot of like racism stemming in the judicial system. And I read that book and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to community activism. I wanted to go into this work. And I sat at this table and I was just like, how can I make a space? How can I do this? And I was just questioning myself. And my friend said, don't take yourself out of the game before you even attempt to play. And again, later on, I was applying for internships and I was like, I'm never going to get that. Like, I'm not going to apply. Like, I'm not even going to apply. And I had a career development person that I've been working with to like help and motivate me with this, because it's, the first time someone in my family or in my life is attempting to take this route. I was like, I'm not going to apply. I'm not going to get it. And they were like, stop taking yourself out of the game before you even attempt to play. Like, let them do that for you. And so, like, as I've moved along, I sent out that email with my resume, and I just sent it to a state legislator, and I was, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. I'm a hard worker. I'm kind of smart, and I freaking care about what's going on. Like, how can you fit me in? And they were like, we'll fit you in right away. And so don't take yourself, and this is my message, just don't take yourself out of the game before you even try to play. Like, just start playing and you'll find your way and you'll find your space.
Yes, what a great way to end, SJ. Like, where there is no opportunity, create an opportunity yourself. And yes, don't take yourself out of the game. I always say, let them tell you no. That's their job. They'll tell you no, don't tell yourself no. You didn't even start. Like, you didn't actually apply. And there's so much research to back this up that we won't even get into that. But thank you so much, everyone, Lauren, Cassandra, SJ, Manali, for this incredible, incredible panel. Thank you to our audience members who joined and interacted with us in the chat. I look forward to seeing you all on another breakout room chat, and I hope you all have a great rest of your conference. Bye, everyone.